Welcome, everyone. Our webinar is going to get started in just a couple of moments. We're just going to give folks a few seconds to flow into the meeting. As that happens, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. We're excited to have you here this morning. Okay, once again, good morning and welcome to today's webinar on supporting your co-op's clean energy goals with USDA's Rural Energy for America program. My name is Liz and I'm here to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started. First off, thank you so much for joining us. We have an hour together this morning. It's going to fly by, but we are reserving 15 or so minutes reserved for audience Q&A at the end. So please do ask questions throughout the webinar. You can use the chat box, you can use the Q&A feature. We've got folks on the back end who are going to be monitoring that conversation, and we will do our best to get to as many of your questions as possible. I also want to mention quickly that this webinar is being recorded, so you will have an opportunity to share it with your networks on YouTube. And to get us started today, I am going to hand things over to our host for today's conversation, Aaliyah Ned. Aaliyah heads up NCBA CLUSA's advocacy work, and she's put together an incredible lineup of USDA partners for us to hear from today. So welcome, Aaliyah. Let's get started.
Thanks so much, Liz, and good morning, everyone, and a very early good morning to folks who may be joining us from the West Coast. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join today's webinar to discuss an exciting funding opportunity for co-ops through USDA's Rural Energy for America program, also known as REAP. As Liz mentioned, my name is Aaliyah Ned, and I'm the new Government Relations Manager here at the National Cooperative Business Association, leading our advocacy team. As your voice in Washington, D.C., we are here to serve you all, our members. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any advocacy related work, and I will drop my contact information in the chat. Also, please feel free to drop your name and co-op or organization in the chat to say hello, which I see some of you are already doing. But we are delighted to be joined by our partners at USDA to discuss the REAP program and how all rural co-ops may be able to leverage the new investments and updates created by the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, back in August, President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest piece of legislation to address the climate crisis and reduce greenhouse gas emissions across sectors, as well as advance environmental justice priorities. While our focus today will be specifically on the REAP program, our team at NCBA has put together a preliminary analysis of the IRA that identifies the various programs and potential co-op sectors that may be able to leverage these new investments. Now, there is a significant amount of funding for USDA programs and some changes that have been made to assist folks in accessing the widest available use of these programs to advance these goals. But there are also investments that housing co-ops may be able to access. There's an environmental justice and climate block grant and the greenhouse gas reduction fund for our financing partners, as well as tax credits for individuals and businesses. So we'll drop the link to that NCBA analysis in the chat for you all as well. Throughout the webinar, as mentioned, if questions pop up, please feel free to send them through the chat or Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to address them either directly in the chat or during our Q&A session at the end. So with that, just want to give a huge thank you to our USDA partners, and we'll jump right into our agenda here. To start, I'll turn it over to our presenter for the day, which is Jonathan Burns from USDA Rural Development, who served as a business and loan grant analyst and is an overall REAP expert. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah, and thank you so much for all you folks at the NCBA for the opportunity to talk about the Renewable Energy for America program. Looking forward to talking about it and hopefully being able to get some awareness out there and to drum up some applications for the program. As was mentioned, my name is Jonathan Burns, and I'm a business loan and grant analyst with the Program Management Division at Rural Business Cooperative Service. Also joining us today behind the scenes is Deborah Yoakum. She's also on the program management team to help with questions and answers. So obviously the topic today is the Renewable Energy for America program. And let's see, there we go. So we're going to be talking about the Renewable Energy for America program. That's the umbrella, and underneath that umbrella is some facets to the program. We're going to talk about all of them. We're going to talk about the energy audit and renewable energy development assistance grant, or EA-RETA. We're going to talk about renewable energy systems and energy efficiency improvement grants, RES-EEI. We're also going to talk about REAP guaranteed loan program. And we're also going to talk about energy efficiency equipment guarantee loan program, or EEE as I go. So REAP is broken down into two funding programs. It helps increase American independence by increasing the private sector of renewable energy and decreasing the demand for energy through energy efficiency improvements. The first REAP funding program is technical assistance based, and it provides funds for the completion of energy audits and renewable energy development assistance, including site-specific renewable energy assessments. This program, like I said, is referred to as REAP EA-RETA program. The energy audit and renewable energy site assessment programs, or documents, excuse me, or the deliverables from that program provided by the EA-RETA program can be used as part of the application for an RES-EEI program. So there's some synergy between some of the aspects of the REAP program. And the RES-EEI program provides assistance for the purchase and installation of renewable energy systems and for making energy efficiency improvements. Ag producers can also install energy efficiency equipment and systems for agricultural production and processing under this program. So we're going to start by talking about EA-RETA. So the first thing we're going to talk about are eligible applicants. So eligible applicants between the REAP programs are not the same. So just because an entity may be eligible for an EA-RETA grant, it doesn't mean that they're going to be eligible for the RES-EEI grant. So for the EA-RETA program, eligible applicants include universities, states, local tribal governments, rural electric cooperatives, public power entities, and resource conservation and development councils, so RC&Ds. Funds for this program are used to conduct energy audits, EA, or not and, or to provide renewable energy development assistance for rural small businesses and agricultural producers. So just note that a project cannot be for both conducting energy audits and for conducting renewable energy development assistance. This slide describes the overall EA-RETA program and how it's administered. The applicant applies for an EA grant or a RETA grant. Applications compete in a national competition once a year. Successful applicants are awarded grant funds, and the funds are used to conduct energy audits and to provide renewable energy development assistance to ag producers or small businesses. And like I mentioned, this program can lead really nicely into an RES or EEI application. An ag producer or rural small business now has the key information that's going to be required on an application for REAP RES-EEI to install a renewable energy system or to perform energy efficiency improvements. Applications for EA-RETA are due every year on January 31st. So unfortunately, it's only once a year. Applicants can submit one EA grant and one RETA grant in a fiscal year for a total combined grant funding of $100,000. Applicants cannot request funds for conducting, like I said, both EA and RETA in the same application. They would need to be different projects. As I mentioned, one national competition is held. Awards and obligations are made by March 31st of every year. Projects or applicants have 2 years to complete their projects. I want to plant a seed for any university, government entity, rural electric cooperative that may be listening out there today. There's you have the opportunity to build capacity that will drive energy-related investments and benefit small businesses and ag producers within your state. If you want to learn more about this opportunity, we strongly encourage you to reach out to your state energy coordinator. So at Rural Development, we have located within every state, we have a renewable energy coordinator. They're going to be your main point of contact. If you have questions on any of your potential projects, they'll be able to let you know of any speed bumps, be able to work with you on planning of your project to make sure that it's as successful as possible. And there is a link to the energy coordinators provided in the chat, as well as the link to the official website for REAP is in there as well. So now let's take a look at the RES EEI portion of REAP. This is where we're going to spend most of our time talking about it in the program. And as I'm sure many of you have heard, and is what Leah had mentioned, is that we've been recently provided with a substantial increase in funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, of 2022. So this program, ag producers and rural small businesses can use program funds to install commercially available renewable energy systems and to make energy efficiency improvements. So that's one of the main points to the program, is it must be commercially available technology. The program is not eligible for any research or development. You'll also notice that the slide says business use, not residential. So it is important to know that there can't be any residential aspect to your projects. Let's start by talking about EEI for a minute. So for energy efficiency improvements, EEI, we're casting a really large net here. We're talking about eligible purposes would be for lighting upgrades, LED lighting upgrades, HVAC system upgrades, variable fan drives, automated controls, insulation, more energy efficiency coolers or freezers. If you're a store and you have the displays that you keep your eggs in or your cheeses and it's open to the store, you can install energy efficient doors to keep that cooling in place there to really help save a lot of energy that way. So basically, if you're saving energy on an annual basis, chances are it's going to be eligible. So obtaining an energy audit or an assessment is really going to be one of the first steps if you're interested in filing an EEI application. Also, right next to contacting your state energy coordinator. So one of the most important aspects of an EEI application, though, that I would like to bring up right now, is that applicants must have actual utility bills for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the application. And an energy audit or an assessment, depending on the total project costs, conducted according to the REAP regs, and it must show energy savings in order for the project to be eligible. So you need to have utility bills, documented history, cost, and use, and you need to have a third-party energy audit or assessment that actually demonstrates that there will be savings. Applicants can provide up to 5 years of historical utility bills data that can be averaged in the energy audit. You can start by interested stakeholders can start by, a good place to start would be to contact your energy provider. Perhaps they have some resources available to you. And we're, of course, at Rural Development willing to speak with you to be able to possibly point you in the right direction of an entity that we know that does those in your area. And then also we would be willing to go as far as to speak with energy auditors or assessors to make sure that they're aware of the requirements of an energy audit or an energy assessment, to make sure that they send us the information that we need. For the renewable energy systems, or RES side of the house, we obviously have the 800-pound gorilla in the room is solar, but please don't let that overshadow the other renewable energy technologies that are eligible: wind, small hydroelectric, anaerobic digesters, biomass, geothermal, and yes, even wave and ocean power is eligible. A few examples of some that you may not think of inside of the box when you think renewable energy systems, but a couple of examples that we've done are greenhouses installing solar electric systems for hot water, agricultural producers installing solar powered hot water pumps or irrigation systems, installing a geothermal heat system in a vet clinic, installing biomass burners that burn wood pellets for energy. So it really isn't just solar, although it does make up the majority of our applications. It really is a wonderful program. It packs a great 1-2 punch. It helps with the sustainability of the planet, and it also helps with the sustainability of the ag producer or rural small business. We see many applications come through our door for energy efficiency improvements, where the applicant is saving 50, 70, 100% of their utility bill in some cases. It really can make a difference in lowering that bottom line for the applicant entity. So I mentioned a few times now the 2 eligible applicants for the RES EEI program, ag producers and small businesses. So let's start by taking a look at the rural small business. And so first, there's 2 aspects to a small business. The first one is you need to be one of the entities that are mentioned on the slide here. So if you're interested in applying for this program, you need to be either a private for-profit entity, that could be sole proprietor, partnership, corporation, or you can be a cooperative. You could also be an electric utility, and you could be a tribal corporation or other tribal business entities. And we'll talk about more on each of these. The slide also mentions that eligible small businesses must be located in a rural area. We are rural development. Our mission is to help rural America. So you may hear the term project in rural area or non-metro community of less than 50,000. But if we're really looking at it, I don't want you to concentrate on the less than 50,000 just because your town or city may have less than 50,000 people, and it doesn't mean that it's eligible. It's actually the eligibility website is actually linked here. We have a map that you can go in, put your address in, and it'll tell you if it's eligible or not. But the eligibility actually drills down to the census tract. So when you look it up, it'll show you the shaded regions, but it'll have all these, fingers, and sometimes one side of the road will be eligible, the other won't. So you really can't just go by, oh, my town is less than 50,000, we're going to be eligible. You really have to go to the website. You have to put your address in there. We do maintain that website. It is accurate, and we can't stress that enough. So applicants can certify their eligibility as a small business on their application. So we used to have applicants provide documentation to verify their eligibility. A couple of years ago, we did some program updates, and now applicants self-certify on the application forms as to meeting their requirements. However, just understand that the agency does reserve the right to request additional documentation to verify that eligibility. We could ask for financial information or your org docs or your org charts. Just know that you do self-certify on the application as to being one of these entities, but we do always reserve the right to request the documentation. So let's take a look at the private for-profit entity. So as I mentioned, it could be a sole proprietor, a partnership, a corporation. It is the most common type of entity that we run across. The applicant must be, important things to realize about this is that the applicant must be operational and must incur income and expenses and control the REAP project. So REAP grant applicants across the board always need to own and operate the system. That's important to realize. And what that means is that shell entities are not eligible REAP applicants. Once we see the for-profit entity, then we're going to take a look at the primary source of revenue for the business, and the applicant cannot exceed the SBA size standard limit, NAICS code, in order to be determined eligible. We'll talk more about the SBA size standards in greater detail in a few minutes. Just know that there's a limit on how big you can be. You need to be a small business, and we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. We defer to the SBA when it comes to that. A cooperative. A cooperative is a type of entity that is eligible as a small business. It must be organized and operate as a cooperative. Cooperatives are not restricted to being for-profit entities. Cooperatives that qualify under Section 501c12 of the IRS code are eligible. Cooperatives must meet the SBI size standards, and some cooperatives own other entities, other legal entities. So be sure to ask about affiliation when you're discussing your potential project with your state energy coordinator. Some of the common NAICS codes that we see for our projects for cooperatives are, post-harvest crop activities, electric co-ops, electric power distribution, supermarkets and other grocery retailers, packaging and crating. Those are some of the more common NAICS codes that we see. They're also called business codes. You may see them. An electric utility is also a type of entity that's eligible as a small business if they provide service to a rural customer and operate independently of government control. So the questions that we're going to need answered, or you should ask yourself, are you providing services to rural customers? Who controls the entity? Does it operate independently of government control? Is the board appointed by town government, or is it elected? Are there any restrictions from serving on utility board or in the town government for the board? Are funds kept separate? And how are the rates established? These are some of the questions that we're going to ask, and organizational documents are probably going to be required in order for us to make an eligibility determination on that. So if the utilities board of directors are not appointed by town government, but rather elected, if there are restrictions from serving on the utility board and in town government at the same time, if the funds are kept separate and the board establishes the rates and appoints the superintendent, then the entity sounds like it's going to be eligible. The final type of entity that a small business is eligible as is a tribal corporation or other tribal business entity. The definition of a tribal entity is expansive, and it includes all entities falling under the eligible legal structures, including but not limited to tribal-owned corporations, intertribal nonprofits and associations, Alaska Native corporations, Native entities within the state of Alaska recognized by and eligible to receive services from the U.S. Department of Interior Bureau of Indian Affairs, Native Hawaiian organizations, including homestead associations and entities majority owned by individual members of the tribe. The tribe itself is not eligible. A letter from a tribal attorney to address the eligibility of the tribal entity is typically submitted to the agency for review. The entity must also meet the SBA size standards, but a major difference for the tribal corporation would be that we do not consider the resource of the tribal government. So only the applicant entity itself must meet the size standard. So that was the first part of small business eligibility. So you need to be one of those 4 entities that we talked about. And I've said the size standards, I've mentioned that. So that's the second part of the eligibility as a small business. So like I said, we don't reinvent the wheel. We rely on the SBA for the definition of a small business. And as I mentioned, we look at the entity itself and the entity combined with other entities that they're affiliated with, or I should say is controlled by, or it controls. They both must be under the size standard threshold to be eligible, with that one exception being the tribal entities. So the SBA size standards, there are 2 options for a small business to fit under that definition for. The first and easiest to take a look at is the alternative size standard. So it's noted in Roman numeral 1 on this slide, and the applicant's tangible net worth cannot be in excess of 15 million, and average net income, excluding carryover losses from the preceding 2 fiscal years, cannot be in excess of $5 million. So if you can meet that requirement alone, then you're eligible. Then you've met that requirement, I should say. The second option is to use the size standard threshold for the industry in which the applicant is primarily engaged. So the size standards are listed in the SBA's table of size standards, which I believe a link is pasted in the chat. It can be found at 13 CFR part 121 section 201. If you're having trouble sleeping tonight, please by all means look that up. You could probably just Google SBA size standards too if you're having trouble with it. But the applicant entity must provide your NAICS code on the application form. And then we're going to match the source of their primary, that matches the source of your primary revenue. So if you look up the NAICS code, it's going to be like 80 pages long, and la-di-da-di everybody who has a legal business that reports revenue to the IRS has to do so with a NAICS code or business code on your tax returns. NAICS is an acronym. It stands for North American Industrial Classification System. And it's very specific on the revenue stream that it recognizes. So whatever you're reporting to the IRS as your revenue stream, the SBA has a limitation assigned to that code. And the limitation is going to be either the number of employees that you have, or it's going to be revenue for the company. So you can check that out. If you probably need to check out your tax returns to be sure to even find out what that is. I would recommend, sometimes when you file your taxes, you just carry forward the same number, but we definitely recommend that you keep checking on that website because they do update that. And oftentimes what happens is your NAICS code will be dropped and it'll be changed to something else. So just be aware of that. So for an SBA size standards that has a number of employees, for an SBA size standard that has a number of employees threshold, it's calculated as the average number of all employees for the preceding 12 calendar months. And that's all employees count as all employees count as one. It doesn't matter if it's full-time, part-time, or temporary. That's one employee. If the size standard is using annual receipts, then we look at the average total income plus cost of goods sold for the 5 most recent years. We can't use projections when utilizing those calculations. We use the length of time that the entity has been in operation, so it could be less than 12 months if necessary. Eligibility as a small business can be confusing, but we're here to help you. I said it before and I'll say it again. Please contact your state energy coordinator if you have any questions. will be able to help walk you through that process. The second type of eligible applicant for REAP is an ag producer. An ag producer is an individual, meaning a sole proprietorship, or an entity that receives 50% or more of their revenue from agricultural operations. The percentage is calculated as the average of gross agricultural operation income of the entity divided by the gross total income of the entity for the last 5 more recent years. If the entity has been in operation for less than 5 years, use the average gross agricultural income and the total gross income for as long as the entity has been in operation. An important thing to note about agricultural producers is that they can be located in rural or non-rural areas, as long as there is production at the project site. So you can be in downtown Boston, Seattle, if you're on site producing agricultural products and that's where your business is, the project is located, then it'll be eligible. I'll go ahead and read the definition from the regulations for agricultural producers. It says it's a person, including nonprofits, directly engaged in the production of agricultural products through labor management and operations, including the cultivating, growing, and harvesting of plants and crops, including farming, breeding, raising, feeding, or housing of livestock, including ranching, forestry products, hydroponics, nursery stock, or aquaculture, whereby 50% or greater of their gross income is derived from the operations. So the key term would be they're directly engaged in the production. The types of funding from through REAP include a grant, a loan guarantee, and also the possibility of a combined grant and loan guarantee. Agricultural producers may also apply for the guaranteed loan for a new energy efficiency equipment and systems for ag production and processing. REAP grants can now request for up to 40% of total eligible project costs. This was increased when we published this was recently increased through the Inflation Reduction Act. We published a notice in December that made some programmatic updates. So it used to be 25%, but now it's up to 40% of eligible project costs. One of the things that also changed is the maximum amount of grants that you can get. It was $500,000 for a renewable energy system, but now it's up to $1 million. And it used to be $250,000 for an energy efficiency improvement, but now it's up to $500,000. So it's pretty substantial increases there. A combined grant and guaranteed loan request can be made for up to 75% of the total eligible project costs. A REAP guaranteed loan has a maximum loan size of $25 million. And a commercial lender makes the loan. So that's important to realize. It's a guaranteed loan. You wouldn't be writing checks directly to the USDA. One of the first things that you're going to want to do is contact your local lender and tell them that you're interested in getting a REAP guaranteed loan. It's their loan, and we're issuing a guarantee on their loan should the borrower go default on their loan. Right now, the guarantee is currently at 80%. So what that means is that we will pay up to 80 cents on the dollar to the lender should the loan go default. It's important to know that there's a 1% initial guarantee fee associated with guaranteed loans and a 1/4 of 1% annual renewal fee or 25 basis points on guaranteed loans. So there are some additional fees that are required for those. The lender with agency concurrence establishes and justifies the guaranteed loan terms based on the use of the guaranteed loan funds, the economic life of the assets being financed, and those being used as collateral, and the borrower's repayment. The maximum term is 40 years, but it's important to realize that it is the lender's loan. We're issuing the guarantee on it. Again, you wouldn't be making payments to USDA. Energy efficiency equipment and system assistance. It's a loan guarantee and it's for agricultural producers only. to produce and install equipment for ag production and processing. And the funding is limited to 15% of overall annual loan funds. So it's not a terribly large program, but just know that it is out there. And it is also important to know that there's a distinction. It's different than an EEI or energy efficiency improvement. It does not need to be a replacement project. It can be just for equipment or a system for ag production or processing that exceed efficiency standards currently on the market. So just know that EEI and EEE are different by more than just one letter. In addition, a few additional program requirements to mention that we always try to make sure everybody's aware of is for renewable energy system applications, a feasibility study may be required based on the risk of the project. So it used to be that if your total project costs were more than 200,000, you had to submit a feasibility study with your project. That was one of the updates to the program that was made along with the self-certification that I mentioned earlier. It's based on risk, really. It still could be required in some cases if you're a really small operation and you're looking to put in a really big solar farm. That's really going to change the nature of your business, and that could be a risk. So I would strongly encourage you to contact your state energy coordinator and just go over your potential project with them. All energy efficiency projects require an energy audit or an assessment, like I've said before, and I can't stress it enough. They must be based on actual historic utility bills. We can't accept energy audits that use simulated numbers versus actual costs that are incurred. It's also important to know that all REAP applications require a NEPA environmental review or National Environmental Protection Act. These are federal dollars. We can't be using federal dollars for projects that could negatively impact other federally protected resources. So please, again, through discussion with your state energy coordinator, they'll be able to give you some more details as to what level of environmental review is required. Obviously, the larger your project, if it's over 10 acres, it could require a really in-depth environmental review, but it's really going to be a function of how complex your project is, and ground disturbance, for example, is a major contributor to what level of review is required. So again, it's important for you to contact your state energy coordinator. Keep that line of communication open for the entire process. It's also important to know, do not begin project construction or incur project costs prior to the agency being able to determine that you've submitted a completed application, and the environmental review must be completed. So in other words, if you've already spent money on your project, if you've already bought the equipment, if you've already been spending money, and then you submit an application to the agency, unfortunately, all of the funds that you've spent before we've received your application and determined it to be eligible are going to be excluded from our reimbursement calculations when it comes to it, unfortunately. That also means it's important to realize that just because you submit the required documents that you will find on our program website, it doesn't necessarily mean that your application is complete. If your application is lacking in one of the sections and it doesn't have some of the required information, if you skip over some of those imperative and important points, then it could be an incomplete application. The agency will issue complete application received letters, and it's important to realize that just because you sent in everything that we ask or everything that is on the website, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's complete, because you may have missed a section or we may need more details. Please, again, we can't stress enough, let's keep that line of communication open. So the IRA funding, the REAP program is funded through the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, the Farm Bill, at approximately $50 million in what's called mandatory funding every year. In addition to that, we got that IRA funding. which is pretty substantial. And it's over $2 billion in total through fiscal year 2027. The IRA is broken down into two facets: general program funds at approximately $1.7 billion and approximately $304 million for underutilized renewable energy technologies and technical assistance. The agency will prioritize underutilized technology via priority points in the scoring section. However, the initial focus will be on delivering technical assistance in order to capitalize on the opportunity provided by the large influx of IRA funding. This is just an example of, excuse me. So you may be asking what REAP funds look like for fiscal year 23. So the $2 billion in IRA funding was front-loaded. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time with the passage of it and everything to get the fiscal year 22 money out the door. So that means we have, for fiscal year 23, we have the 23 funds as well as 22 funds that we were able to roll over. So it's a huge increase in funding for the REAP program for fiscal year 23. We published a notice announcing $250 million in IRA funds plus the $50 million in mandatory farm bill funds back in December. So right now, the next application deadline is March 31st. But please know that the agency will be publishing a second notice for the REAP program this spring, which will make additional funding available. And it will also add additional program competitions or application competitions and some other program enhancements. So you can Google Federal Register. This is the compendium of this is how the federal government lets the public know of all financial assistance programs that are out there. So if you find the Federal Register and you type in REAP, R-E-A-P, the very first one that will pop up, you'll see is the notice that we published in December. Please keep your eyes peeled for that. We're in the process of developing that. We don't know exactly when it'll be published. As soon as we're able to, it will be published. So if you could go on there and check, every so often, you'll be able to find that, and you'll be not the first to know, but amongst the first to know. This slide shows the significance of that IRA funding and what kind of an impact it had on a state's allocation. So every state receives its own allocation. They receive two buckets of money. One bucket is for grant requests of $20,000 or less, and then they receive another bucket of money for grant requests of $20,000 or more, or what we call unrestricted, restricted and unrestricted. So this is an example of a state that I just took a random state and I put in their numbers here. So this one state had for fiscal year 22 for grant requests of under 20,000, they had 478,000. Well, in fiscal year 23, the draft allocations that we have calculated, they're going to get 1,626,000. And the unrestricted, you can see it went from 1.2 to 6.6. So that's an increase of anywhere from 3 to 5-fold in funding that has been made available through the IRA. So it's a huge opportunity, and we want to take every opportunity that we can to help highlight this, through doing webinars with our partners like we're doing today. So I've said it once before, I'll say it again, maybe just one last time. Contact your state renewable energy coordinator. The official program website is listed here. It's also provided in a link in the chat. That website has a lot of great resources on it. As I mentioned, the To Apply tab has all of the documents that we need. And it also has the eligibility website will be on there. And it also has a link to the state energy coordinators, which I believe is a separate link provided in the chat as well. Applications can be submitted through the mail, so you could post them to any rural development office. You can also email applications to any of the state energy coordinators. And if you so chose, you could also submit your applications through grants.gov. So that concludes the discussion portion of today's webinar. I want to thank you for tuning in today, everybody. I really hope that we were able to get the wheels turning, to be able to get some good potential projects in the works. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Leah to help facilitate any questions and answers that everybody has. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for the thorough and in-depth overview of how co-ops can really leverage these new and exciting opportunities, as you demonstrated both in the types of projects that co-ops are now able to potentially finance, as well as the money that is flowing through the investments made in the IRA. So really appreciate all of the great information. And by and large, one of the biggest questions we've gotten is, will the PowerPoint and all of the great links and resources that you've shared today be available to participants?
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And so I think with that, we can confirm that the PowerPoint will be available for folks after the webinar and be sent out, and we'll be sure to send out all of those great links. And I know you touched on it many times, but could you just remind us of the 4 entities, including co-ops, that would qualify for this program, where co-ops can find out whether they qualify, and what a NAICS code is?
Sure. So the types of, here, I'll see if I can, you want me to put it back up on the screen? Maybe I could try to do that. Let's see. I don't know. I think I lost it. Anyways, I can just go over it. So the types of entities that are eligible as a small business are a private for-profit entity, a cooperative, an electric utility, and a tribal corporation or other tribal business entities. So remember, so I'll back up just a little bit more. So for REAP, you either need to be an ag producer, be directly engaged in the production of agricultural production, or a small business. Small business, you can be private for-profit, cooperative, an electric utility, or a tribal corporation or other tribal business entities. If you're going to apply as a small business, there are 2 main functions to that, or 2 things that we're going to look at the most. Those are the size standard. So the size standards are going to be, there's 2 ways to qualify with the size standards, either taking a look at your tangible net worth. So your tangible net worth cannot be in excess of 15 million, and your average income, excluding any carryover losses for the last 2 years, can't be more than 5 million. Or you got to look at your NAICS code. So again, NAICS code it's an acronym that stands for North American Industry Classification Code. It's on taxes. So look at your taxes and look up the SBA NAICS code limitation, and you'll see what the limitation is. Oh, for my NAICS code for apple orchard, packaging industry, then the limitation is, I'm just making this up, $2 million, or it'll be 100 employees, and that'll be the limit. Once you reach that, you're no longer considered a small business according to the SBA. Did I answer all those questions, all the parts to that question?
Yep, you hit the nail on the head, Jonathan. And I think a question that we've seen pop up in a few variations is, do you have any examples of projects that co-ops have done in the past or that have been more successful? And maybe an example of how a grocery or food co-op might be able to use this program?
Yes, sure. I took a look at some of the projects that we've done for co-ops recently. I did put up on the screen some of the more popular NAICS codes that are on there, but we do quite a few projects for rural electric cooperatives, and they're mostly going to be energy efficiency improvements. Projects like installing LED lighting throughout their service area, There's also, we also did cooperative grocery stores for cooler replacement. I think I mentioned that briefly in the slide, but we recently funded a project to install more energy efficiency deli case counters, a produce cooler, a sandwich prep cooler with all internal compressors, and they saved 78.49% of their company's energy use. So, it's a pretty wide range. A peanut warehouse co-op that we've done that installed more efficient peanut dryers and trailers. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said it's a wide net for energy efficiency improvements. It really is. If it's commercially available, if you have documented use and cost through bills, and you want to upgrade that equipment or replace it, and you can get it, and you can get an audit or an assessment, it should be eligible. LED lightings again is popular. You can save a ton of money with that. And yeah, Apple Packers co-op that we did, they saved 98% of their electricity they actually installed a renewable energy system. So they decided to put up a solar system to offset their energy usage. So this Apple Packers co-op was able to offset 98% of their electrical usage. And that one in particular, they realized over $84,000 in savings per year. I mean, some of them are pretty substantial, but those are some examples of projects that we've done over the last couple of years.
Those are great examples, and 70 to 98% of savings through some of the investments that have been financed through this program is incredible. And so in terms of co-ops who are looking to leverage this funding, are there key department priorities or other components to creating a competitive application? And are there any resources available to help co-ops in the application process?
Yes, that's a great question. And I guess the first resource is one that I've mentioned several times, is your state energy coordinator. If you're interested in seeing if you're eligible, if you're interested in seeing anything about, please give them a call. In terms of, they're the first resource. They can point you in the direction of, perhaps a local resource conservation and development corporation can provide assistance. Maybe they're nonprofits that help. Sometimes people apply for applications or apply for programs like REAP. In terms of competitive applications, it is a competitive program, REAP, meaning all eligible applications, all complete and eligible applications are scored. And every state has their own bucket of money that they compete applications in for that money. But I mean, I think I tried to demonstrate through that one slide showing that there's been a 3 to 5 increase fold in funding for the program. So that means it's a lot less competitive than it used to be. So if you have an eligible application, an eligible project, an eligible applicant, it's going to be hard for it not to get chosen, because not only do states hold their own competitions, but let's say, for example, a state is oversubscribed with all of this extra money still. Well, there's still an opportunity to get funded with that application. What we do is, at the national level, what we do is, once the competition is over, obviously some states are going to have a lot less money left over, some are going to have more. We pool all the unused money together, and then we hold another national office competition. So all the states who have applications that were not selected, they have a chance to move forward and to compete again for those pooled funds from the national office competition. So there's many opportunities for one eligible applicant to get funding through. So I wouldn't be so concerned about your score so much as we used to be anyways. But the first thing to do is to start with your state energy coordinator, they'll be able to let you know how their state is looking in terms of, what the interest has been in their state, what they think that they're going to get for applications, and any resources that are specific to your area. They should be able to help you with that.
That's a great overview there. So it sounds like step one is really contacting your state energy office if you are at all interested in accessing this program, recognizing that there is a large pool of money, as you've seen, 4 to 5-fold, that has been allocated to states, and that may even be available after those state allocations. And 3, I think you mentioned to keep your eyes out for a new notice of funding opportunity this spring, if that's correct. And as someone pointed out in the chat, it is a good year to do those energy upgrades. So keep your eyes out for that information. And let's see here. I think we have one last question regarding the application, and you've mentioned having a complete application previously. Are there any extra processes that co-ops should be aware of in the application process? As long as a co-op meets that small business definition between those 2 distinctions and is located in a rural area, will they be treated the same as any other applicant?
Yes, there's no, in terms of additional steps or hoops to jump through, there are none. There are no, they're eligible for the, as long as they're eligible, then they're going to be treated the same as everybody else. So they're going to be subject to the same standards and requirements as everybody else. I will bring up SAM registration. That is something that I didn't discuss, but it is required to be registered through this SAM.gov, or the System for Award Management. So I would say step 1 is to call your energy coordinator, and step 2 probably would be to start your SAM registration, because probably for many different reasons, it sometimes can take a while for an entity. It doesn't matter if you're a sole proprietor or a corporation or a cooperative. Sometimes it takes a while to go through that SAM registration process, and that is required through this program. So there's no additional requirements. Just know that that's probably one of the more time-consuming, tedious process that you would have to go through. I know that they do a pretty thorough check. If you misspell your address or something like that, it can get kicked back and delay. So just know that there's no additional requirements, just same standards as everyone else.
That's great to hear. And if you all are experiencing any sort of disparities between what you've heard here in terms of co-ops being eligible and maybe some of the information that you're getting from your state office, I would encourage you to reach out to our USDA partners who are here with us today. Last question for you, Jonathan. If a business already has a SAM number, do they have to re-register to apply to this program, or are they all set?
No, they don't have to re-register. They do need to maintain an active status, though. So it's my registrations are only good for 1 year. Once that year is up, you do have to renew. So if you forget or you don't get that renewal, that could be a problem come reimbursement time and time to get your money. You're going to need to re-up that. So.
Awesome. Well, I think that covers all of the questions that we have today. Again, thank you so much to you, Jonathan, and our USDA partners who are here. Contact information has been shared in the chat, and we'll be sure to push the PowerPoint and all of the wonderful links and helpful information shared during the webinar today out to our attendees. But just want to say thank you to our participants, and please don't hesitate to reach out if folks can be helpful.
Yes, thank you, Leah. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.